Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. I woke up to my mother-in-law's shrill curses. The dull pain in the back of my head from hitting the ceramic basin still lingered. My ears were filled with Linda's piercing voice. A useless hen who can't even lay eggs. And you've got the nerve to fake a faint. My son must have had the worst luck in 8 lifetimes to marry you. When I opened my eyes and saw the mottled ceiling, I nearly laughed. This was the tiny 9-square-meter shoebox apartment Daniel and I lived in after we got married. The sallow face in the mirror froze me for 2 seconds. The calendar on the wall was still set to April 3, 1985. Rain smacked against the glass window, so familiar. It was tonight, just like in my previous life. Tonight was when I had caught Daniel and the textile factory's accountant fooling around in the warehouse. Those 2 scumbags had the nerve to accuse me of stalking my own husband. Linda used that moment to force me into signing a divorce agreement that left me with absolutely nothing. Sister May's wooden door across the hall was shaking from the pounding. The voice of our neighbor mixed with the sound of rain echoed from outside. Your man's hooking up with that accountant Lisa at the textile factory warehouse. I saw it with my own eyes. I grabbed the ceramic basin with the red double happiness emblem and charged outside. Linda shouted from behind. If you dare cause a scene, I'll make sure Daniel divorces you on the spot. Rain slashed my face like icy knives. I sprinted down the stairwell, piled high with honeycomb coal bricks. Memories from my past life surged back so vividly it was terrifying. Daniel eventually became the deputy director of the factory. He raised an illegitimate child with Lisa, using the dowry I had brought into the marriage. Meanwhile, I was kicked back to my parents' house and eventually died in depression. The cruelest part: that retired soldier who used to deliver coal, Zachary, turned out to be the richest man in the entire state 10 years later. The flickering bulb in the warehouse made my vision spin. As I flung the door open, I saw Daniel pinning Lisa against a pile of fabric. Her pale legs were wrapped tightly around his waist. I swung the ceramic basin at the iron rack. With a loud crash, dust from the ceiling rained down. The wife you bought with $300 just caught you cheating in the warehouse. Lisa shrieked and yanked her clothes to cover herself. Daniel's hands trembled as he pulled up his pants. Emily, are you out of your mind? I grabbed the soggy work gloves and flung them in his face. Last August 16th in the security room. September 3rd in the locker room. Want me to make a list of all the times you two hooked up? A crowd of night shift workers had already gathered at the entrance. Daniel lunged at me, trying to shut me up. I dodged and pulled a folded divorce agreement from the pocket of my polyester shirt. This was the one I had rewritten over the past 3 nights after being reborn. Every clause carefully aligned with the latest marriage law. Sign it. And the $3,000 your mother hid in the camper wood box under her bed. Consider that my compensation for my wasted youth. The crowd suddenly buzzed. I turned and saw Zachary standing at the warehouse door. His dark green military uniform was soaked black by the rain, and he was glaring fiercely at Daniel's raised fist. I suddenly remembered in my past life after I had died. I saw him floating in the air, placing a bouquet of bluebell flowers at my grave. Without hesitation, I stepped over the scattered fabric and grabbed his sleeve. I heard your mom setting you up for blind dates. Lisa, still covered in red nail polish, kept shrieking behind me, shameless. I leaned close to Zachary's ear. Marry me. I'll help you make $100,000 within 3 years. The warehouse fell dead silent. You could hear the raindrops pounding on the metal roof. Zachary shifted slightly, and I saw the edge of a government bond sticking out of his uniform pocket. It was the $50 treasury bond one had secretly placed in his coal basket 2 days ago. Just released in 1985. 3 months later, its value would double on the black market. Suddenly, Daniel lunged to snatch the divorce papers. Zachary stepped in front of me. Years of hauling coal had built his arms thick with muscle. He pushed Daniel aside with sheer strength. In a voice only I could hear, he said, "Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. in front of the Civil Affairs Bureau." I looked up at the redness creeping across his ears, and remembered the interview I read in a finance magazine from my past life. Zachary had said his first pot of gold came from a miracle on a rainy day. The concrete steps of the Civil Affairs Bureau were still wet from last night's rain. Holding my freshly stamped divorce certificate, I looked up to see Zachary waiting under the phoenix tree. His military uniform had faded with countless washes. He was holding a thick brown envelope. "Emily," he said softly, as if afraid to startle something fragile. "This is the marriage application." I took it and looked inside. Besides the signed permission from the Army, there was an old yellowing merit certificate. Zachary had fought valiantly in the counterattack war and received a first-class personal achievement medal. I looked up sharply, stunned. He turned his face away awkwardly, his ears red again. "It's all in the past," he muttered. "In my past life, I had only known he was a retired soldier. I never imagined he was a real war hero. No wonder he was always so quiet, and why his right leg would ache whenever it rained." The clerk at the registration desk adjusted her reading glasses and glanced down at my divorce certificate. "Second marriage, huh?" Zachary glanced away, his eyes falling on the empty spot where his military badge used to be. His tone as a soldier was still light and casual. He stood ramrod straight, but I slammed his first-class merit certificate on the counter. "Ma'am, have you ever seen a living recipient of first-class military honor?" The hard stamp landed on our marriage certificate with a crisp thud. Then Zachary pulled out a package from his coat. Inside was an unblemished Medal of Honor. When he pinned it to my shirt collar, his rough fingertips brushed my collarbone. "Sorry to put you through this," he murmured. We rode a bicycle back to the textile factory's family dorms to pack my things. Daniel was squatting at the stairwell, smoking a cigarette. The moment he saw me return, he stubbed it out. "Emily, I messed up yesterday." He didn't even finish his sentence before he noticed the military medal on my collar. His face instantly turned ashen. I went straight for the camper box that Lynn had packed for me earlier. Inside were my mother's silver bracelets and the polyester fabric I brought as part of my dowry. Linda screamed from the doorway, clinging to the frame. "Leave the snowflake face cream Daniel bought you." I hurled the tin box at her feet. "Your son got it by exchanging labor coupons. Do you want the toilet paper from the factory back, too?" Zachary picked up the camper box with one hand and took my bundle with the other. As we reached the staircase, Daniel suddenly lunged forward and grabbed my arm. "What kind of life do you think you'll have with a broke-ass soldier?" Zachary turned around. I could hear his knuckles cracking as he clenched his fist, but in the end, he simply pulled me behind him and said calmly, "Sir, please show some respect." The Army compound was even more rundown than I'd imagined. The red brick walls were mottled with old propaganda slogans like, "Prepare for war, prepare for famine." Outside one of the small houses was a pile of coal briquettes. Military rubber shoes, faded from countless washings, were lined up on the windowsill to dry. "Blackie," Zachary called toward the house. A small, dark, and thin boy, about 7 or 8, peeked out after a while. Despite his frail frame, his eyes sparkled with brilliance. I crouched to his level and smiled. "I'm Emily. Would you like me to make you steamed egg pudding from now on?" The boy suddenly turned and bolted back into the house. A loud thud followed as his head hit the cabinet. I rushed in to find him shivering on the bed with a blazing fever. His forehead was so hot it could fry an egg. My past life nursing knowledge kicked in instantly. Get a basin of cold water. Find a clean towel. The well water in the ceramic basin was quickly heated by his fever. While I physically cooled him down, I instructed Zachary to mix traditional herbal medicine with warm water, then go to the supply store and buy some antibiotic pills. Blackie clenched his jaw so tightly we couldn't feed him anything. When I pinched his jaw open and tried to give him the medicine, he suddenly burst out crying. "Don't hit me. I'll cut firewood properly next time." Zachary dropped the tea mug in his hand with a loud crash. That's when I saw the bruises on the boy's arms map like patches of pain. Late into the night, his fever finally broke. As I wrung out a warm towel, Zachary wrapped his arms around me from behind. This man, who had faced bullets on the battlefield without shedding a tear, now trembled like a leaf in a storm. "No one's ever treated me or this child with such kindness," he whispered, his chin resting on my shoulder as the warmth of his breath slipped into my collar. At dawn, I pulled 20 treasury bonds from the bottom of the camper box. $50 bonds issued in 1985, The most reliable investment I remembered from my past life. By late July, their black market value would rise to 85 each. Zachary, I said, nudging him awake in the kitchen. Take me to the trust store today. His bloodshot eyes were filled with confusion, but he still pulled out the bicycle. I sat on the back seat, clutching the edge of his jacket as we passed through the misty streets. Mr. Shao at the trust store was Zachary's old war buddy. When he saw me pull out the treasury bonds, he sneered. Sis, nobody wants these anymore. You'd be lucky to get 70 cents on the dollar. I pulled out 3 and slapped them on the counter. Next month, buy them back at 85. We'll split the profit 50/50ths. Mr. Joe looked at Zachary in disbelief. That foolish man actually nodded and agreed. 3 days later, Joe burst into the compound, eyes red with excitement, waving a copy of the Economic Daily. The bonds went up. They're rising. He shoved a wad of crisp bills into my hands, more than Daniel's 6-month salary. Zachary was fixing the coal stove, hands black with ash, frozen in disbelief. I pulled out 15 $10 notes and stuffed them into his pocket. Buy new clothes for you and Blackie tomorrow. As I turned to leave, he grabbed my wrist. His soot-stained fingers traced a crooked star in the palm of my hand. Emily, were you sent by the heavens to save me? I was picking up polyester fabric when a sickeningly sweet voice rang out behind me. Emily, what a coincidence. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Lillian, my so-called best friend in my past life, the woman I gave everything to, heart and soul. And in the end, she teamed up with Daniel to push me to the edge of ruin. She was wearing a brand new floral dress today, her hair curled in solid waves, carrying a plastic shopping bag with Shanghai printed on it. Clearly some exclusive item Daniel had gotten for her. I heard you and that soldier already got your marriage certificate, she said, leaning in close. The overpowering stench of cheap perfume wafted from her body. Don't feel too bad. Daniel was only seduced by that accountant, Lisa. My fingertips turned white from gripping the fabric. In my past life, that one line from her had made me soften and withdraw my report against Daniel. But 6 months later, I discovered they had been sleeping together long before, and the child was already 3 years old. Really? I turned to face her directly, staring at her lips painted bright red. Then why were you sneaking around the textile dorms last month when Daniel dropped off his illegitimate son for me to raise? Your face looked a lot different back then. Lillian's face went pale. The plastic bag slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a soft thud. Several women around us who were browsing fabric perked up, listening intently. Nonsense. What are you saying? She shrieked, reaching out to cover my mouth. I stepped back and pulled out the second-hand tape recorder I had bought from the thrift store. I hit play. Daniel's wife can't have kids. Perfect. Just dump the boy on her. She's dumb. Give her money and she'll do whatever you say. Lillian's voice rang out clearly, laced with calculated malice. That had been the first thing I did after my rebirth. Spent $15 on an old recorder, and waited outside the back window of the textile dorms to capture this. The entire store fell into a stunned silence. Lillian's face turned from red to white. She lunged at me, trying to snatch the recorder. I sidestepped, and she slammed into the glass counter, smudging her freshly applied lipstick. Emily, you'll die a miserable death, she screamed hysterically. A store clerk quickly came over and blocked her. Take it outside if you want to fight. Break anything in here, and you'll have to pay for it. I calmly tucked the recorder away, and placed the navy blue fabric I had chosen onto the counter. Comrade, please write me a receipt. As I turned around, I caught Lillian glaring daggers at me, her eyes practically dripping poison. Just as I stepped out of the store, I bumped into Zachary's old army buddy, Mr. Shao. The big guy from the Industry and Commerce Bureau scratched his head and grinned. Sis-in-law. Zachary asked me to check. When are you planning to open that clothing shop? My eyes lit up. Finally, all the experience I had from my past life running a clothing business could be put to use. Brother, can you help me get an individual business license? I lowered my voice. It'd be best if I could get a stall on a main street. Mr. Shao slapped his chest confidently. Leave it to me. The government's encouraging private business now, and you've got a veteran husband. It'll be approved in 3 days, tops. When I got home, Blackie was squatting at the doorway. The moment he saw me, he stood up quickly, wiping his hands on his pants. Ever since that night, he had a fever. He'd become much more attached to me. Look what I got for you. A new notebook. I pulled a Sun Wukong notebook and some fruit candy from my cloth bag. His eyes lit up, but he didn't dare reach out. Take it. Zachary's voice came from inside. He was fixing the wobbly leg on our dining table, his hands covered in wood shavings. Only then did Blackie carefully accept the notebook and whisper, "Thank you, Auntie." I ruffled his hair, then went inside and spread the fabric out on the bed. Zachary came over to look. The scent of pine and sawdust clung to him as he leaned close, his breath brushing against my ear. "You're really opening a shop?" I replied while sketching. "I'll start with kids' overalls. Every family needs children's clothes these days." Just as I finished speaking, the courtyard gate burst open. Linda's piercing voice cracked like thunder. "You shameless. You stole my $3,000, and now you're living the good life." I rushed to the door and saw her standing in the courtyard with her hands on her hips, two sleazy-looking young men behind her. Several neighbors peeked out their windows from nearby homes. "Mrs. Grant," I said coldly, "you better have proof when you accuse someone." "That money was your son's voluntary compensation to me in the divorce," she spat, spraying saliva. "That was my retirement fund. If you don't pay up today, I'll smash every single thing you own." One of the thugs behind Linda raised a stick, ready to smash the clothesline. In the blink of an eye, Zachary stepped in. With a single move, he twisted the guy's wrist. The strength of a trained recon soldier was nothing a street punk could compare to. The guy howled like a pig being slaughtered. "You're disturbing public order in a military family compound," Zachary said, his voice calm but authoritative. The whole courtyard fell silent. "I could have you arrested for disrupting the peace." Just then, a bucket of water splashed down from the second floor, landing right on Linda's head. Mrs. Zhang, the wife of a factory worker, leaned out the window. "Lady, are you out of your mind yelling like that in the middle of the day? My kids are trying to nap." Even Mrs. Lee, Captain Lee's wife from next door, stepped out holding a laundry basin. "Emily is such a sweet girl. She helped patch up my daughter's pants just the other day." Linda stood there drenched and speechless, looking like a wet chicken. She shot me a venomous glare and spat, "You better watch yourself." Then she yanked the two punks and stormed off. Someone in the courtyard began clapping. Others quickly joined in. Zachary let go of the guy who was still clutching his wrist and looked back at me, eyes filled with a new kind of admiration. That night, I leaned over the sewing machine, finishing the prototype. Blackie had already gone to sleep. Zachary sat on a small stool nearby, helping me wind thread. The dim yellow light stretched his shadow long across the wall, casting over the glorious family award banner. Then he spoke softly, almost to himself. "You're amazing." I paused my foot on the pedal and looked at him. This man who hadn't even flinched on the battlefield now looked almost shy. "I haven't even shown you how amazing I really am," I said with a smile, pointing at the finished design sketch. "Once we get the license, I'll start with 20 pairs of overalls to test the waters." He took the blueprint and stared at it for a long time. Then he said, "Emily, I think I've struck gold with you." The sound of cicadas chirping echoed outside the window. The sewing machine clicked along rhythmically, mixing with the summer night breeze. The business license application on the table fluttered lightly. Under business type, I had written carefully, "Custom children's clothing." The day Zachary's transfer orders came through, I was rushing to finish the last batch of overalls. When he handed me the official document with the red seal, he gently tapped the words Southern Coastal Island Garrison with his finger. "It's rough out there," he said, "but the seafood's good." I snipped off the last thread and unfolded the overalls. "I heard scallops are cheap over there. We can turn them into sauces and sell them back in the city." Zachary froze like a startled goose. He probably never expected the wife he brought home from the mainland was already planning how to turn his hometown specialties into profit. On moving day, Blackie clutched the new school bag I made him like a treasure. Inside was a comic book of Sun Wukong battles, the White Bone Demon. At the dock, with the salty sea breeze in the air, Zachary held the camper box in one hand and wrapped the other protectively around my waist, afraid I'd get jostled in the crowd. The family compound on South Island was even more barebones than I'd imagined. Sea vines crawled along the red brick walls. You could see the gray-blue ocean just by pushing open the window. The worst part was the lack of supplies. The co-op store only restocked on the 15th of every month. Sanitary pads were always the first thing to sell out. The night my period came unexpectedly, I was curled up on the bed in pain. I had sewn a homemade pad using old towels. Zachary returned from night duty to find me pale and sweating. Without a word, he dashed back out into the rain. Half an hour later, he returned soaking wet, holding a cloth bundle. "Sister Lou from the mess hall taught me," he said, ears burning red. He shoved the bundle into my hands and darted into the kitchen. The clang of pots and pans echoed from inside. A few minutes later, he brought out a bowl of ginger-infused brown sugar water, still steaming. I sipped the sweet and spicy broth slowly, listening to him outside the door, whispering to Blackie, "Mommy's tummy hurts. Be a good boy. Walk softly." Blackie tiptoed into the room and placed his favorite candy beside my pillow. The next morning, I noticed Zachary had washed the bloody cloths overnight and hung them on the clothesline. The sea breeze puffed them up like a row of embarrassed white flags. Half a month after the transfer, I had already figured out the island's co-op schedule. Every time the tide receded, fishermen would come into the compound carrying buckets of scallops and oysters, hawking their fresh catch. The price was only 1/3 of what it cost in the city. Captain Lee's wife came to me and asked, "Want to go into business together?" Sister Lou came over carrying 2 baskets of dried scallops. "You can read and do math. Let's make seafood sauce and sell it to the mainland." We scraped together $30 as starting capital and set up a large iron pot in the kitchen. We blanched the scallops, shredded them by hand, added garlic and chili, and simmered the mixture slowly over low heat. The smell drifted through half the housing compound, and soon kids were hanging on windowsills, drooling. When we poured the first batch into glass jars, Sister Lou suddenly smacked her leg. "We need a label." I cut a piece of red paper and wrote "True Artisan of the South Sea" with a calligraphy brush. When Zachary came home that evening, he quietly added a little 5-pointed star at the bottom that became the official logo of our product. Opportunity arrived faster than we expected. Zachary's commander brought 2 cases of the sauce as local specialties when he went to a provincial meeting. 3 days later, while I was drying kelp, the courier came running, breathless. "Ma'am, the commander wants you at the guest house. There's a businessman from Hong Kong who just arrived." The Hong Kong merchant's name was Mr. Lin. His hair was slicked back, shiny with pomade, and behind his gold-rimmed glasses, his eyes widened sharply the moment he saw me. "Miss Chun." My heart skipped a beat. In my past life, I didn't learn the truth until the day I died. That I was the long-lost daughter of the wealthy Chun family from Hong Kong. Mr. Lin suddenly burst into Cantonese. "Mr. Chan has been searching for you for 20 years. "You've got the wrong person," I interrupted him, deliberately responding in Mandarin with a Shandong accent. "If you're placing an order, the minimum batch is 20 bottles. Zachary entered just then, fresh from training. His combat uniform was soaked dark with sweat, his muscular arms outlined under the tight sleeves. Mr. Lin leaned in and suddenly said, "Sweetheart," in clumsy Mandarin, "if you sign an exclusive distributor contract, I'll double the price." The air froze. Zachary's military canteen fell from his hand with a clang, rolling to the corner of the wall. On the walk back, he marched ahead at lightning speed. His combat boots crunched the gravel with every step. I chased after him, panting. That's just how Hong Kong businessmen talk to everyone. He suddenly stopped short. I almost crashed into his back. This man who had survived bullets on the battlefield now had a jawline so tense it looked like stone. "Why?" he asked after a long pause, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Why did he call you sweetheart?" The sea breeze tousled his buzz-cut hair, a few strands sticking up defiantly. I don't know why, but I reached out to smooth them down, and he grabbed my wrist. "Emily." His voice was barely recognizable. Just then, the courier ran up again. "Ma'am, the commander wants you at headquarters right away." Zachary let out a long breath and loosened his grip, slipping something into my palm. It was a bullet casing, still warm from being worn against his body. On the bottom, clumsily scratched into the metal, was my name. That night, I found a small iron box beneath the sewing machine. Inside were 12 neatly stacked letters that had never been sent. The earliest postmark was from 1979. One of the envelopes was stained with a brown speck of dried blood. Dear Comrade Emily, the letter read. I am Daniel's fellow soldier. He asked me to let you know he's doing well. My fingers trembled. So 10 years ago on the battlefield, it had been Zachary writing Daniel's letters home. He had been hiding my replies in his chest pocket all along. Outside, the tide roared against the rocks. The sea breeze lifted the golden business card left by Mr. Lin, revealing Lin Shichan, General Manager, Chan Group, Hong Kong. I tucked it deep into the bottom of the iron box, along with all the words I still couldn't say. 3 days after Mr. Lin left, I was standing in line at the co-op buying salt when I overheard 2 clerks gossiping behind the counter. Did you hear that Hong Kong boss is searching for his daughter? He's offering a 100,000 yuan reward. The one who lost a jade pendant, the other replied. The salt jar nearly slipped from my hands. In my past life, I had only learned of this on the day I died. Hong Kong tycoon Chanji had been searching for the daughter who was kidnapped as a child. The only clue was half a jade pendant. And in that life, it was my so-called best friend Rose who stole it, and claimed to be the missing Aries. Here's your salt, the clerk said, snapping me out of it. Just then, a familiar figure passed by the door. Rose, wearing a trendy seagull print dress, was standing on tiptoe, staring at the missing person poster on the wall. A red string peeked out from Rose's neckline, the pendant unmistakably a half piece of white jade. My fingers tightened instinctively, trembling. In my past life, she had used that very jade to pose as the long-lost eyes of the Chen family, while I was branded a fraud and thrown into disgrace. And now she had shown up 2 years earlier than in my previous life. News of the Hong Kong businessman's arrival must have already spread. Emily. Rose turned and smiled sweetly. I heard your seafood sauce is even selling in Hong Kong now. Her fingers absent-mindedly grazed the jade pendant on her chest. My mother's keepsake. The one I couldn't retrieve even on my deathbed. I forced back the urge to tear it from her neck and smiled calmly. Just trying to make a living. That's a unique pendant you've got there. It's an heirloom, she replied quickly, tucking it back into her shirt. Then she added, oh, and did you hear? Daniel's going to be promoted to deputy director. He was asking about you just yesterday. I pretended not to notice the calculation flickering in her eyes as I bent to arrange my cloth bag. Please congratulate him for me. As I turned to leave, I bumped into a solid chest. I hadn't realized Zachary had come up behind me. The flap of his field jacket was slightly raised, revealing a bandage wrapped around his arm. He'd injured himself during training that morning. On the way home, Zachary was unusually quiet. He didn't speak until I had finished cooking and placed the noodle bowls on the table. That jade belonged to your old friend, right? His voice was low. Some friend, just like rats and snakes in the same nest. I stirred the scallions in my bowl, trying to act casual. I didn't notice Blackie quietly sliding the boiled egg from his own bowl into mine. That jade pendant on her neck, Zachary began again. But before he could finish, someone banged on the courtyard gate. Sister Le burst in flustered. Emily, come quick. There's trouble at the co-op. Your husband, Zachary. I dropped my chopsticks and ran. In the fading light, I saw 3 punks surrounding Zachary. Broken glass and soy sauce covered the ground. Joe Wise stood at the alley entrance shrieking, "Stop it! Don't hit him!" But his voice was so fake it made me sick. Blood was already soaking through Zachary's bandage, but he held something tightly in his arms. One of the thugs suddenly pulled out a switchblade. Soldiers need to mind their own damn business. I grabbed a shovel, leaning against the wall, and rushed over. But before I could swing, Zachary turned sideways and took the slash across his ribs. He grunted. Something slipped from his arms. A ledger stamped with "True Artisan of the South Sea." He had gone to the co-op to reconcile accounts. The distant sound of a whistle pierced the air. The gang cursed and scattered. Zachary collapsed to his knees in a pool of blood, still trying to hand me the ledger. July's profit is on the 3rd page. At the military hospital, under the cold white lights, the nurse cut open his bloodied uniform. I stared frozen at the knife wound slicing across his abdomen. In my past life, after placing flowers on my grave, he had coughed up blood alone in the rain and died just like this. It didn't hit any organs, the doctor said after stitching him up. Just a flesh wound. He gave me a long look. He kept calling your name during the operation. Once the room was quiet, I opened Zachary's shoulder bag looking for a towel, and found a tin box instead. Inside were stacks of yellowed notebooks. The oldest one had Frontline Diary 1979 scribbled on the cover. Today I wrote a letter home for Daniel. He asked me to start it with, "Dear Emily." My heart clenched. He said she knitted him a sweater, but he gave it to some performance troupe girl. If I survive, I want to tell her that under the starlit sky of the battlefield, all I could think about was her smile and the little dimples when she laughs. I closed the notebook and found a photo wedged underneath. A young Zachary stood beneath an old pagoda tree. In the background was the technical school for the textile factory where I had studied. He had secretly kept my photo for 10 years. A raspy voice called out, "Have you looked enough?" I turned. Zachary was awake, pale but smiling faintly. I walked over, holding the photo. Fall of 1978, the factory sports meet. He shut his eyes, pretending to be asleep, but his Adam's apple bobbed nervously. I leaned in and whispered, "Comrade Zachary, your secret crush. The organization's aware of it now." Lightning cracked outside the window. As the rain pounded the glass, the head nurse pushed the door open. "Comrade Emily, you have an urgent telegram." The telegram was worded formally. Mr. Chan Jiwan cordially invites the founder of True Artisan of the South Sea to discuss cooperation. But beneath the official signature was a small sketch of a jade pendant, exactly the same pattern as the one Rose wore. I folded the telegram and slipped it into my pocket. Turning to Zachary, I grinned. "Want to watch a good show?" 3 days later, a feature interview of me appeared in the Island Daily. Seafood sauce worker responds to Hong Kong tycoon's search. I'll always see my father as a humble war veteran. I had said the photo accompanying the article showed me sitting beside Zachary's hospital bed, smiling as I fed him. I had made sure Rose could clearly see the metal tin peeking out from under Zachary's pillow. That afternoon, she arrived at the hospital wearing a newly tailored dress. The fake jade pendant around her neck jingled softly as she moved, but her eyes were fixed on the tin box. "Emily," she said sweetly, settling close to me on the bed. "Mr. Chan's secretary came to see me today. He said, the jade pendant is his daughter's keepsake." I slowly peeled an apple. "Really funny? I remember you bought that piece of jade from the thrift store 2 years ago." The knife slipped through the apple with a soft crack. "Daniel thought it was overpriced. I even lent you $30 for it." Rose's face went pale. I leaned toward her ear and whispered, "What do you think will happen when Mr. Chan finds out someone tried to impersonate his daughter using a fake pendant?" "You're lying," she snapped, suddenly jumping to her feet. The jade pendant struck the corner of the nightstand with a loud crack, revealing a brittle interior filled with cheap stone powder. That was exactly how she'd pulled the switch in my past life, waiting until the real pendant showed up before swapping it. Zachary started coughing just then. I turned to pour him a glass of water, deliberately knocking over the tin box. Notebooks and photos spilled across the floor. On top was a picture of me standing at the entrance to the textile vocational school. A full flawless Yangji jade pendant hanging from my neck. Rose's eyes widened like saucers. Of course she recognized it. The carving on the jade in the photo was completely different from her imitation. "Oh, by the way," I said with a smile as I picked up the photo, "Mr. Chan's secretary is coming to the island tomorrow. Want to come meet him together?" She bolted from the room in panic, knocking over the potted plant by the door. Zachary reached out and caught the drip before it could hit my head. The sudden motion pulled at his wound, and he winced from the pain, but still asked, "So, the real jade is with you?" I pulled out the red string from my collar. The half piece of white jade gleamed softly under the light, smooth and radiant. My mother had sewn it into the lining of my winter coat before she died. In my previous life, I froze to death on the street before I ever learned what it was worth. Zachary gripped my trembling fingers with his uninjured hand. Outside, the storm raged on, but in the sterile scent of disinfectant and quiet light of the hospital, we shared a smile. The next day, when the Hong Kong secretary arrived, he would coincidentally discover Rose's criminal record for selling counterfeit jade. As for me, I would continue being the queen of seafood sauces until the moment my tycoon father came to claim me in person. On the day the secretary came ashore, Rose wore a brand new seagull print dress. Around her neck was that cracked fake pendant hastily glued back together. She stood at the dock, craning her neck waiting. From a distance, I watched her with a faint smirk. Miss Chen, Mr. Lin, the secretary, stepped off the boat in a crisp suit and reached out to shake my hand. Mr. Chan is very impressed with true artisan of the South Sea. He'd like to invite you to the Autumn Trade Expo in Guangga. Rose rushed forward, intentionally shaking the pendant on her chest. Mr. Lin. I'm Lin, the secretary cut in sharply, not even glancing at her. He pulled a copy of the Island Daily from his briefcase and pointed to an article. Miss Rose, Mr. Chan asked me to inform you. Fraud is a criminal offense. Rose's face turned ghostly white. Her lips trembled, but no words came out. I slowly pulled the real Yangji jade pendant from my pocket. In the sunlight, its texture was smooth, the patterns clear and unmistakable. Mr. Lin's eyes lit up just as he opened his mouth. I spoke first about the trade expo. I'll consider it. But first, I glanced at Rose. I've got some unfinished business to handle. Her retreating figure, stumbling over her own feet, drew chuckles from the dock workers. Mr. Lin adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses and said meaningfully, Miss Chen, Mr. Chan said, if you're willing to acknowledge your identity, he'll immediately arrange a private jet to take you back to Hong Kong. I shook my head. No rush. Why rush? In my past life, Rose had pretended to be his daughter and been welcomed into the Chan family, but internal conflicts tore the company apart. 3 years later, when the real jade pendant surfaced, she was kicked out with nothing. By then, I had already frozen to death alone. When the official invitation to the trade fair arrived, Zachary's injury had mostly healed. He held the gold-embossed envelope and flipped it over and over, brows furrowed. You're really going? Of course. I spread out a new design sketch, a modified version of children's overalls. Not only am I going, I'm coming back with a massive contract. Zachary was silent for a while. Then he opened the drawer and pulled out a cloth-wrapped bundle. Inside were 10 thick stacks of bills, 10,000 yuan in total. It's from my stipend in Blackies, he added, his voice low. If it's not enough, I'll find a way. My eyes filled with tears. Daniel used to argue with me over a 5 yuan jar of face cream, while Zachary handed me everything he had without even asking how I planned to spend it. On the opening day of the Canton Fair, I wore a navy blue outfit of my own design and stood at the booth with samples in hand. Mr. Lin personally brought several foreign buyers to meet me. One of them, a blonde, blue-eyed British businessman, picked up a pair of children's overalls and exclaimed in surprise, "Is this waterproof fabric?" He smiled as he turned the pants inside out, showing the waterproof lining at the cuffs. Kids can play in the water without getting wet. He signed an order on the spot for 50,000 pieces. Other clients from Southeast Asia, also introduced by Mr. Lin, quickly placed orders. 3 days later, my small workshop had racked up over 1 million yuan in orders. Even leaders from the provincial industry department came by the booth to shake my hand. On the train ride back from Guangga, I opened the front page of the South Island Daily. The headline photo was of Rose being led away by the police. The title read, Fake Jade Pendant Scam Uncovered. Total fraud exceeds 100,000 yuan. I let out a cold chuckle. Then I flipped to page 2 and nearly choked. There it was, Daniel's name in bold. Deputy Director of Textile Factory Daniel Wang under investigation for embezzlement. The photo showed him surrounded by workers at the factory gate, his pant legs covered in rotting cabbage leaves. When the train pulled into the station, Zachary and Blackie were already waiting on the platform. Blackie held up a crumpled piece of composition paper, eyes shining. "Auntie, my essay got published." I took it and looked closer. It was the South Island Daily Supplement page. The headline read, My Stepmom by Zachary Jr. Blackie. She makes the best egg pudding in the world. She stayed up all night when I had a fever. Dad says she's a star that fell from the sky. My eyes stung. When I looked up, Zachary was gazing at me quietly, the warmth in his eyes almost overflowing. On our way home, we passed by the textile factory. Daniel was squatting near the entrance, disheveled and unshaven. When he saw us, he shot to his feet. "Emily," he ran toward me. But Zachary stepped between us with a single side step, blocking his path. Daniel's bloodshot eyes locked onto mine. "Are you happy now? I got reported for embezzlement because of you." I scoffed. "I wasn't the one who reported you. Lisa did." In my past life, Lisa had taken the fall and gone to prison for Daniel. This time, all I did was tell her the truth a little earlier. Daniel suddenly dropped to his knees and reached for the hem of my pants. "Emily, I was wrong. Let's get back together. You have money now. We can." Zachary grabbed him by the collar and yanked him to his feet. His voice was ice cold. "Daniel Wong is harassing my wife. I don't mind sending you to the police station to cool off." From behind, Blackie peeked out and said loudly, "Dad, the paper said he's a criminal." Daniel's face turned the color of ash. He turned and slunk away without another word. That night, Zachary taped the newspaper clipping next to our Canton Fair invitation on the wall. Blackie had already gone to bed. I sat at the sewing machine organizing contract orders when Zachary came up behind me and hugged me, resting his chin on my shoulder. "Emily," he murmured softly, "have I ever told you meeting you is the luckiest thing that's ever happened to me?" I turned around and looked into his eyes. They were deep and dark, reflecting the lamplight like a sky full of stars. The next day, the South Island Daily ran a front-page photo of the three of us. The headline read, "Model Family of Entrepreneurship from Island Workshop to Canton Fair." On the same day, buried inside the paper was a small announcement. Chairman Chan Jiawan of the Hong Kong-based Chan Group, to visit South Island for an official tour. 3 days after our family photo was published, Zachary was suddenly taken away by military security. That morning, I was simmering a fresh batch of seafood sauce. The chili in the air was so strong it made my eyes water. Blackie came running into the kitchen, face pale. "Auntie, Dad got taken away in a jeep." The ladle fell from my hands and clattered into the iron pot. I ran to the courtyard just in time to see a green military jeep kicking up a cloud of dust. On the ground lay a document stamped in red ink. "Zachary Chen is under immediate investigation for suspected leaking of military secrets. Effective immediately, he will be detained and interrogated." No. My fingers trembled as I clutched the paper. Zachary would never. He's a war hero. Clean to the end. How is this even possible, Emily? It was the courier, Zachary's comrade, Little Jang. His eyes were red as he shoved a crumpled scrap of paper into my hand. "The commander told me to give you this." On it was Zachary's messy handwriting. "Don't investigate the jade pendant. Take care of yourself and the child." A chill spread through my entire body. The jade pendant. The Chan Group of Hong Kong. The military district refused all visitation requests. Clinging to hope, I went to the Bureau of Industry and Commerce. As soon as Mr. Xiao saw me, he slapped his thigh. "Sister-in-law, your Zachary's no traitor. That man has eyes like a hawk." He leaned closer and lowered his voice. "The person who reported him. The remittance record shows they received Hong Kong dollars." My fingertips went numb as I stared at the foreign currency receipt Mr. Zhao dug out from the bottom drawer. The recipient's name printed in black ink, Daniel Wong. "Can you trace the sender?" I asked. Mr. Zhao shook his head. "Not unless you have access to offshore account info." I turned and ran straight to the docks. The gold sign of Lin Trading Company gleamed under the sun. When the receptionist heard I wanted to see Lin Shichan, she smiled with something almost like mockery. "Miss Chen, Mr. Lin has been expecting you." His office was carpeted wall to wall with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire South Island harbor. He pushed a cup of coffee toward me. "Miss Chen, have you finally decided to accept your roots?" "I need to investigate a Hong Kong dollar remittance," I said, slapping the receipt on the coffee table. "This money came from your company to Daniel Wong." The lenses of Lin Shichang's gold-rimmed glasses caught a glint of something cold. "Mr. Chan is disappointed. You'd rather see your husband in prison than acknowledge your birthright." I stood up suddenly, tipping the coffee cup. Brown liquid soaked into the pristine white carpet. You framed Zachary. Proof? Lin Shichong asked, slowly polishing his glasses. Zachary received foreign money in exchange for classified military information. There's witness testimony and physical evidence. He smiled. Unless you can prove that money came from somewhere else. At the military guest house, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Zachary sat behind the iron bars, visibly thinner. Sign it. He pushed a sheet of paper toward me. The ink on the divorce agreement was still fresh. Custody of Blackie was assigned to me. I stared at his trembling fingers and noticed something. The nail on his pinky was bruised and dark. Torture. Zachary, my voice came out almost unrecognizable. In our last life, you were the one who buried me. In this life, I'll sit in prison with you. His head jerked up, his bloodshot eyes locked onto mine. Emily, this case carries the death penalty. I reached into the inner pocket of my blouse and slapped another document onto the table. I had Mr. Zhao pull some strings at the Foreign Exchange Bureau this morning. These show large recent fund transfers from Lin Trading to an offshore account. The money used to frame you didn't come from Lin Trading directly. I leaned closer to the iron bars. Someone used Lin Trading as a shell company to launder money and pin it on you and the Chan Group. Zachary's pupils contracted sharply. Suddenly, the head of the military security department burst through the door. Time's up. Wait. Zachary stood bolt upright and barked. Sir, I request immediate contact with Director Zhang Jiangwa at the Special Ops Division. Code phrase, Red Coral. The officer's teacup fell to the floor with a clatter. 2 hours later, I was ushered into the commander's office and saw Zachary again. Alive and well. He stood tall in his full uniform, shoulder insignia gleaming like stars. He gave me a sharp salute. Allow me to reintroduce myself. Special Ops Division, South River Military Region. Codename Reef. Assigned to investigate foreign infiltration through Hong Kong merchants. My knees nearly gave out. Zachary caught me just in time, his palms soaked with sweat. Lin Shichong has been our target for 5 years. He approached you because of your connection to the Chan Group's shipping routes. So that money Daniel Wang received was hush money from Lin Shichong's men. Zachary nodded, his voice taut. They were trying to use the report against me to force you back to Hong Kong to gain control of the Chan Group. Suddenly, I remembered something I'd read in fine print in a past life newspaper. After Mr. Chan was reunited with his daughter, the Chan Group collapsed 3 years later. Suspected hostile short selling. In the cloth bag Zachary handed me was my half of the Yangshi jade pendant. When I held it next to the one hanging from my neck, the 2 pieces fit perfectly. Beneath the jade was a handwritten note. Nanan, I'm sorry, but I never stopped searching for you. Dadlu Bridge, Shenzhen. On the back of the note was another message, this one in Chen's shaky handwriting. Comrade, if Zachary is truly my son-in-law, I could die in peace. Zachary's ears flushed bright red. Flustered, he tried to snatch the note away, but I grabbed it first and tore it to pieces along with the divorce agreement. Shreds of paper fluttered down between us like snow that had waited 10 years to fall. Chen Jiuan's recognition banquet was held at the White Swan Hotel in Guangzhou. The crystal chandeliers made the entire lobby glow with opulence. I wore the navy blue suit Zachary had given me. Around my neck hung the now complete Yangji jade pendant. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows watching ships drift along the Pearl River. I was nervous. Zachary approached me from behind, now dressed in a sharp charcoal suit instead of his military uniform. His shoulders were square and stiff. I reached back and felt the cold sweat on his back. I smiled. Even Commander Chin gets sweaty palms. His ears turned crimson. He was just about to speak when the banquet hall doors burst open. Chen Jiuan rolled in on a wheelchair, hair meticulously combed. The moment his eyes landed on the pendant around my neck, they filled with tears. Nan Nan. Flashbulbs went off around the room. I instinctively stepped back, only to feel Zachary's steady hand on the small of my back. Chen Jiuan unfolded a document with trembling fingers. The microphone amplified his hoarse voice. 51% of the Chan Group shares are hereby transferred to my daughter, Emily Chun. Gasps rippled through the audience. Several men in Hong Kong-style suits shot to their feet. Leading them was someone I recognized, Lin Shihao, Lin Yichang's younger brother. In my past life, he was the one who orchestrated the short-selling attack that destroyed the Chan Group. Mr. Chen, Lin Shihao said with a stiff smile. A girl raised on the mainland probably doesn't understand the shipping business. I was about to respond when the banquet doors flew open again. Blackie, no. Zachary Jr. ran in wearing a tiny tuxedo, holding up a transistor radio. Mom, he shouted, panting. From the radio, the announcer's voice rang out clearly. The military and local police have uncovered a major smuggling operation. The Lin Group is under investigation for collusion with foreign forces. Lin Shihao's face turned ashen. Zachary calmly pressed a button on his walkie-talkie. Let them in. Engines roared outside. 3 police escort tricycles pulled up, followed by a sleek black Santana, 1985's flashiest import car marked with red-on-white military license plates. 2 investigators in uniform stepped out and walked straight toward Lin Shihao. Mr. Lin, please cooperate with our investigation. Around the room, jaws dropped wide enough to fit eggs. Chen Jiuan burst into hearty laughter, slapping the armrest of his wheelchair. This is what I call a true son-in-law of the Chan family. 3 years later in spring, I stood on the rooftop of the tallest building in the provincial capital, wearing a golden ID badge that read Chairwoman, Blue Rise Group. Zachary stood next to me, helping adjust my safety helmet. The 2 silver stars and 1 thick stripe on his shoulder glinted in the sunlight. He had been promoted to a regimental post last year, now overseeing civil-military development projects. President Chen, my secretary called out, rushing over with a pair of gold scissors. It's time for the ribbon cutting. I looked down at the crowd below. Ants from up here. But across the street by a trash bin, I spotted a hunched figure. Daniel Wang was stooped, picking up discarded plastic bottles. He was still wearing that old textile factory uniform, now so filthy its original color was unrecognizable. Zachary followed my gaze. Without a word, he clicked his walkie-talkie. Tell the TV crew to pan left. Almost instantly, the giant LED screen on the building's glass wall lit up, broadcasting a close-up of me lifting the gold scissors. Daniel looked up, dazed. His clouded eyes landed on the massive Blue Rise logo gleaming behind me. Sky and clouds reflecting off the glass like a flawless jade stone. Snip. The scissors cut through the red ribbon. And from the ground below, I heard a scream, raw and agonized. Zachary gently squeezed my fingers. Just got word. Linda was caught stealing pork at the market. She's in custody. 10 years later, bonus chapter. In 1995, just before Hong Kong's handover, Zachary and I stood on the terrace of our villa in Repulse Bay, watching the fireworks. Blackie, now Zachary Jr., had just come home for vacation from the National University of Defense Technology. The red tabs on his uniform shimmered. Mom, our instructor says that South Island operation was textbook perfect. Zachary kept a straight face, but quietly dropped another chicken leg into our son's bowl. I laughed and flipped open the latest issue of Forbes. On the cover was a photo of us, Zachary in uniform, me in a Chanel suit. The headline read, From Island Workshop to Real Estate Empire, the golden decade of a veteran couple. Outside, Victoria Harbor sparkled in our wine glasses. And in that soft light, I suddenly saw the me from 1985 rushing through a storm with a ceramic basin, charging toward the textile factory warehouse. What are you thinking about? Zachary draped a blanket over my shoulders. I leaned into his chest. The 2 jade pendants around our necks bumped together with a soft, joyful chime.